Hi, I'm Emma and I talk about horror and thriller movies here on YouTube, and every year I do a wrap up of the 100 horror films that made the year. These are the films that captured the bigger picture of 2023. The good, the great, and the meh. Basically, if you're a horror lover, this is like a wrap-up of 2023 for you. Kind of like a time capsule. And as a special treat for your convenience, below I've left a spreadsheet of all of these films so you can go through and mark which ones you haven't seen. Make sure to drop in the comments how many you've seen from this list. I've left all the information about dates and categories down below just so we don't have to get into that because I know you want to get straight to the video. But again, I do want to thank my patrons. Thank you so much for all of your support this year. Without you, I would not be able to make videos. If you've ever thought about becoming a patron, we would love to have you over there. You get access to the Discord, hangouts if you wish, and also you get bonus videos every single week. But without further ado, let's dive right into the 100 horror movies of 2023. Night of the Hunted is a story of a woman that makes a pit stop at an isolated gas station, unknowingly drawing the attention of a psychopathic sniper harboring a concealed grudge. Western horror Oregon Trail is the story of a woman's struggle in the harsh Montana winter of 1870. Her relentless fight revolves around the reclaiming of her sole earthly possession, a cherished family horse, from a ruthless gang of bloodthirsty bandits. Following a botched pawn shop heist, The Price We Pay follows two criminals who seek refuge at a remote farmhouse, only to encounter a sinister force far more menacing than any law enforcement. Netflix comedy fantasy horror El Conde is the story of Augusto Pinochet, an aged vampire who's dwelt on Earth for over 250 years, but now he decides it might be time to give in to his mortality. In Renfield, we follow Dracula's loyal henchman who has been institutionalized for decades, but cracks begin to show as he yearns for freedom. Swedish mystery comedy horror The Conference invites viewers to a team-building employer conference where the atmosphere turns nightmarish as allegations of corruption surface. But just as this couldn't get any more tense, the slashings begin. Cocaine Bear may be a creature feature, but it is pure comedy. This made a buzz at the box office this year and is very loosely based on a real story. The film follows an oddball group of cops, criminals, tourists, and teens who happen to be in a Georgia forest where a black bear is dosed with an insane amount of cocaine. Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead is a horror comedy fantasy that follows an overworked man who leans into the zombie outbreak because it allows him to finally feel something for the first time in years. Now he's thriving. Project Z is a Norwegian comedy horror that follows a group of students who plan to make a zombie film, but things get out of hand when they are isolated at their filming location and come face to face with real horror. My Animal follows Heather, an ostracized teenager who falls for a mystery newcomer, Johnny. As their bond deepens, Heather grapples with desires conflicting with her inner secret. Trapped on a deteriorating rig, the Black Demon is the story of a family battling a vengeful megalodon shark. Now they must fight for survival in the depths of the ocean. Meg is back this year for Meg 2: The Trench. Here the crew delves deeper into the ocean's depths, but their mission is derailed by what they find, plunging them to a desperate struggle to stay alive. The long-awaited voyage for the Demeter follows a crew embarking Bulgaria, taking the Black Sea towards England, but soon they discover they are harboring an extensively dangerous piece of cargo on board. Set against the backdrop of a raging Louisiana hurricane, The Flood is the story of what happens when a jailbreak meets a pack of hungry alligators during a chaotic storm. Godzilla Minus One takes place in post-war Japan when a new crisis emerges in the form of a giant monster, baptized in the horrific power of the atomic bomb. Based on the novel of the same name, Dark Harvest is the dark story of a small town with a sinister tradition, as the young confront a legendary nightmare in the annual harvest rite of life and death. Blumhouse brought the successful Five Nights Fights at Freddy's franchise to life in this adaptation, twisting the law and mostly based on the books. We follow a troubled security guard who begins working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but during his first night on the job, he realizes he is not alone. Aussie A24 horror Talk to Me made a lot of buzz this year. This is a dark story of a group of friends who begin to conjure spirits using an embalmed hand, but their careless use of this item soon becomes deadly. From Black delves into the story of a recovering addict haunted by the disappearance of their child. But when the opportunity arises to uncover the truth and reconcile, it comes at a harrowing cost. In Blood, we follow Jess, a nurse and a single mother, who returns to her childhood farmhouse with her kids, but soon her son is bitten by a dog, and a mysterious infection takes hold, plunging them into a battle against the unknown. Daughter is the strange, twisted horror about a young woman who is inducted into a bizarre family as their new surrogate daughter. When police break into a home in El Paso, they find dead bodies everywhere. In Satanic Hispanics, police begin to question the mystery behind the haunting scene. In All Fun and Games, a group of teenagers in Salem stumble upon a cursed knife, releasing a demonic entity. Now they're compelled to play twisted, lethal renditions of childhood games. The Sacrifice game is set within a 70s boarding school where the students who can't go home for the holidays are stuck on campus when strangers arrive to turn their world upside down. Now they must survive the night and put a stop to the group's evil plan. Genre-bending Beau is Afraid is a new journey into despair. The story follows Beau, an anxiety-ridden man who must confront his darkest fears as he embarks on an epic odyssey back home. One of the most disturbing films of the year, which was also a sleeper, is Birth Rebirth, the story of a morgue technician who tampers with the dead, but to do so she requires biological materials from a particular source, a vulnerable source. Many people have dubbed When Evil Lurks the film of the year. The Argentinian horror takes place in an isolated village where two brothers stumble upon a possessed man. Now their decisions may lead to widespread chaos as the true power of the entity is revealed. Tin and Tina is a deeply disturbing Spanish horror where we follow a couple who adopt Tin and Tina, seemingly sweet orphans who are obsessed with the Bible verbatim. This leads them down a dark path of literal carnage. 2023 saw a trend of experimental horror films, Annie's Main being one of the strongest contenders. Set in the 70s on a deserted island near the Cornish coast, the film follows a wildlife volunteer whose routine observations lead her on a metaphysical odyssey. Although viral experimental horror Skinamarink was leaked in late 2022, it is a 2023 horror movie. The film is an eerie, nostalgic tale of two children who wake up in an empty house. Experimental sci-fi found footage horror The Outwaters follows a group of friends camping in a desert. Here they attempt to make a music video when they become entangled in a mysterious phenomenon. Where the Devil Roams is an experimented haunted journey following the lives of a family of murderous sideshow performers on a dying carnival circuit. There was a lot more franchise films than you probably realized in 2023, and the found footage series VHS returned, this time taking place in 1985, as we follow 5 chilling narratives inviting audiences on a harrowing expedition into the eerie depths of the 80s. Can you believe we got a Scream movie this year? In Scream 6, we followed yet again the survivors of the ghost face killings. But for the first time, they leave the town of Woodsboro, heading for New York City. But Ghostface always finds a way, and he returns this time with a vengeance. Evil Dead Rise delivered the most carnage by far this year. The entry takes place in a high-rise apartment where a family reunion doesn't go as planned after an earthquake uncovers a dark book that unleashes true evil. The Lamberts were back this year for Insidious: The Red Door, but it had a lot of changes as we watched their son head off for college when old old dangers reappeared. Now the family must go deeper than ever before into the further. Bird Box Barcelona puts a twist on the original as we follow the spread in Barcelona, where Sebastian and his daughter begin their own great adventure of survival. But not everything is as it seems. The Body and the Blood, probably the most controversial film of the year. The Exorcist reboot sequel is the story of two girls who disappear in the woods only to return possessed by an unknown entity. It's the prequel we never asked for. Pet Sematary Bloodlines had its quiet release as a prequel to the Pet Sematary remake of 2019. In this story, we follow a young Judd who is dreaming of escaping Ludlow, but we discover that there's darkness that will tie him to this small town forever. Hell House LLC returned for Carmichael Manor. This is an investigation into the roots of the franchise as we follow an internet sleuth who stays at a property with a dark past that is connected to the original Hell House. Children of the Corn returned in 2023 for its third readaptation. The movie followed a small town that was ripped apart after the rise of an evil spirit lurking in the cornfield turned the children against the adults of the town. Do you want to play a game? Saw X delivered some of the most gruesome moments in the franchise as we follow Jigsaw to Mexico for this entry when his plans to undertake a risky procedure to help prolong his life went awry. There was a lot of mystery this year, and let's start with there's something wrong with the children. This takes place during a weekend getaway where a family's concern escalates as their friends' children start to behave oddly after vanishing into the woods overnight. Malum is a remake of The Last Shift from 2014 by the same filmmakers. In this one, we follow a rookie cop who is put on the last shift at a newly decommissioned police station, but she is not alone and something is dwelling in the darkness. 2023 brought a new Shyamalan entry based on the book The Cabin at the End of the World. Knock at the Cabin is the story of a small family who are approached by a group of strangers who demand they make a choice that could change the world forever. In Run Rabbit Run, Sarah Snook plays a fertility specialist grounded in her beliefs about life and death. However, when her daughter begins to show disturbing behavior, she's compelled to reassess her beliefs. A murder mystery set in Venice with a star-studded cast. This one was inspired by Agatha Christie's 1969 novel Halloween Party. A Haunting in Venice is the story of a retired detective who joins a seance, but when a guest is murdered, he's compelled to resume his investigation role and uncover the real killer. Independent horror Bad Things follows the twisted life of a group of friends who end up at a closed snow resort. What initially appears as a relaxing retreat soon plunges into a psychological whirlwind when the property's dark history resurfaces and cracks in their relationships begin to show. UK psychological thriller The Stray follows the perfect life of an upper middle class woman whose mind begins to unravel when two strangers arrive in town and begin to stalk her every move. The Unheard is the story of Chloe, a woman living with a hearing impairment, opting for experimental treatment to restore her hearing. But as she recovers at her family's seaside residence, she becomes convinced that she is not alone. In The Puppet Man, a woman unravels a chilling mystery when brutal deaths mirror a convicted killer's claims of an evil force's control. With her loved ones at risk, she must break the curse before it's too late. The Portrait is the story of Sophia's devotion to her husband Alex, but this is tested when a mysterious portrait resembling his pre-accident self emerges, unraveling a haunted mystery that threatens her sanity as she seeks answers. In Raging Grace, we follow Joy, a cleaner at the end of her wits, when she receives the offer for a dream job that seems too good to be true. And you know what? It just might be. Lord of Misrule takes place during a village's harvest festival, where a new priest's life is turned upside down when her daughter goes missing, leading her to confront the hidden truths about her new home. A Creature Was Stirring is a fantasy horror where a nurse protects her daughter's mysterious affliction in secrecy. However, when unexpected guests seek refuge during a deadly blizzard, she must try and keep the truth hidden while they're under her roof. One of my most anticipated films of the year did not end up hitting, but it was something that marked 2023 for me. In Dear David, we follow comic artist Adam's tweets about a haunted boy with a crushed head who appears to him in his house at night. Dive into supernatural horror inspired by the internet sensation The Elevator Game. Named just that, we follow a group trying to replicate the online phenomenon where participants access an alternate reality using elevators. This was a real online craze, and the film delves into some of that creepypasta. Rob Savage returned in 2023 for The Boogeyman, the adaptation of a short story by Stephen King, which follows a family whose father unwittingly invites a dark entity into their home. Lifelong friends bonded since childhood reunite to aid their struggling host in Brooklyn 45. But as they gather, their haunting memories begin to materialize. Cobweb is presented as a dark, ominous fairy tale. It's the story of an inquisitive child who uncovers a secret living within his house's walls. It Lives Inside narrates the journey of an Indian American teenager grappling with her identity. Following a rift with a once close friend, she unintentionally unleashes a dark entity. Sound of Silence follows a woman's return from New York to her Italian hometown, prompted by her father's hospitalization. Alone in her family's house, she encounters a dark force linked to a cursed radio. In Unwelcome, married couple Maya and Jamie move to a house in rural Ireland, but encounter a strange creature that they must feed every night or else. Found footage Malibu Horror Story follows a team of paranormal investigators who explore a sacred cave in search of answers to the unsolved disappearance of 4 Malibu teens. In The Offering, a grieving family haunted by loss becomes the target of an ancient demon's intent, forcing them into a battle to save their self both physically and spiritually from destruction. Tobin Bell stars in The Cello, which is yet to hit VOD. In this horror, a cellist discovers that the price of his cello carries a far more sinister implication than he ever imagined. The Bone Woman is a Mexican-Peruvian supernatural body horror film where we follow a woman harboring a long-life desire to become a mother. But when she discovers that she's pregnant, she's engulfed in fear when something dark attaches itself to her. Pressured by societal norms, in Clock we follow a woman who enters a clinical trial based on her fertility issues, but not everything is as it seems. Baby Ruby delves into the curated life of a vlogger influencer. She's about to become a mother for the first time, and as she navigates this new chapter, the lines between her perception of reality and what everyone else sees begins to play on her mind, leading her into a down spiral. Deliver Us takes place in a remote convent, where a nun's claim of immaculate conception triggers an investigation, fearing an ancient prophecy of twin boys, one the Messiah and other the Antichrist. In Consecration, we follow Jenna Malone, who plays Grace and travels to a remote Scottish convent to investigate where her brother died. Here she uncovers a dark truth. The Pope's Exorcist is based off the life of Gabrielle Amorth, the quote, Vatican's exorcist. Here we go on a quest to unravel a conspiracy guarded by the Vatican and triggered by a child's possession. The Nun 2 is definitely a franchise movie, but I had to put it in religious. The movie is set in 1956 France, where a priest's murder sets off a chain of events conjuring Sister Irene to confront Valak once again. A prequel to viral horror Veronica from 2017, Sister Death is the story of a childhood marked by a miracle as a new mysterious nun joins a school to teach young girls. Monsters of California is a sci-fi directed by Tom DeLonge, following a group of teenagers on a quest to find meaning behind a series of mysterious paranormal events in Southern California. In The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, a gifted teenager holds firm in her belief that death is curable, and when someone close to her dies, she will do anything to bring them back. This one is disturbing, but it is sci-fi. Infinity Pool is the brand new Brandon Cronenberg horror sci-fi mindfuck, where we follow a couple who are enjoying a beachside resort vacation on a fictional island, but a horrific accident exposes the resort's perverse subculture and violent solutions. No One Will Save You was a divisive film in 2023, but in my opinion, it was one of the strongest straight-to-streaming horror entries for the year. Alone and haunted by her guilt, we follow an exiled homebody who is thrust into a chilling home invasion. Appendage is a bizarre, twisted sci-fi gore fest as we follow a fashion designer whose life is spiraling out of her control. Now her horror begins to materialize as a warped appendage. And that's just the start of this roller coaster. In the dramatic, violent sequel to Becky, we pick up 2 years later after the events of the first film, where Becky must once again defend herself against a dangerous group determined to end her life. Totally Killer takes place in the town where a Sweet 16 killer resurfaces 35 years after his initial reign of terror to seek another victim. Now, 17-year-old Jamie finds herself transported back in time to solve the mystery. It's a Wonderful Knife is the story of Winnie, the town's hero whose life changes forever after one bloody incident. Now she has the chance to see what her life and the whole town would have been like without her actions. Eli Roth returned for a highly anticipated follow-up to his Grindhouse trailer. Thanksgiving is a solid slasher that takes place after a Black Friday riot ends tragically. Now a mysterious Thanksgiving-inspired killer terrorizes this town. The Blackening is a fast-paced slasher comedy about a group of friends who embark on a weekend away, but soon find themselves confined to a cabin with a horrific game that they're forced to play. Sick was a late entry off the back of the trend of pandemic horror films. In this one, we follow Parker and her friend who opt to quarantine in the family's lake house. Anticipating solitude, their expectations are shattered when they realize they're not alone. Unseen is the story of Sam, who answers a call from Emily, a visually impaired woman fleeing her dangerous ex in the woods. In a bid to survive, she relies on Sam's remote guidance via a video call, using their eyesight as a lifeline. The Dive depicts the story of two sisters embarking on a diving excursion when tragedy strikes, leaving one sister trapped 28 meters underwater. Now, with oxygen levels plummeting, the other sister must battle against the odds to save her life. Quicksand follows an American couple on the verge of divorce who find themselves trapped in quicksand. And to add to this, it's during a storm while hiking in the Colombian rainforest. Dream Scenario is one of the most unique stories I've seen this year. The movie follows an ordinary family man who goes viral in people's dreams, showing up across the country in people's REM cycle, but is not always pleasant. This story leads to a thought-provoking psychological nightmare of accountability and perception. Horror Perpetrator is a twisted, stylized ride about Johnny, a daring teenager navigating a town plagued by the disappearance of young women. Now she grapples with unlocking a formidable power essential to her survival. Norwegian bizarro horror thriller Good Boy is a wild trip, to say the least. When Christian meets a woman on a dating app, things are looking up, but their blossoming relationship takes a dark turn when Christian reveals that he shares his home with Frank, a man who acts like his dog. Swallowed is the intimate journey following two best friends on their last night together before parting ways. But a night of partying ends in terror due to a mix of drugs, bugs, and unexpected surprises. Spoonful of Sugar is an offbeat story about a young woman who is studying children with severe allergies. Taking time off from her studying, she begins babysitting a child who is suffering from a strange disease. But nothing is as it seems, as the truth reveals a very twisted scenario. Nicolas Cage sure was busy this year. Horror Sympathy for the Devil follows what happens when his character gets in a stranger's backseat, holding him at gunpoint, demanding him to drive across state lines. Influencer follows CW, a solo backpacker who is traveling through Thailand. But when she befriends a seasoned influencer traveling the same path, their friendship turns deadly fast. Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey wins the prize for the most unexpected horror in 2023 to hit cinemas worldwide. The story is a horrific twist on the classic tale as we watch Pooh and Piglet embark on a bloody rampage after being abandoned by Christopher Robin. Suitable Flesh is a horny H.P. Lovecraft-inspired tale wrapped up in a Lifetime movie stylization. In this film, a psychiatrist becomes obsessed with one of her younger patients, who is as mysterious as he is dangerous. We head to Norway in There's Something in the Barn, following an American family who have inherited a property, but the barn out the back is harboring an ancient entity that they must keep comfortable or else. Megan was everywhere this year, and with good reason. The bizarre film is the story of a robotics engineer who is employed by a toy company and has the idea to create a lifelike doll for her grieving niece to befriend. In a world full of AI that is learning faster than humans, what could go wrong? Slaughterhouse, yes, you heard me right, made quite a stir this year. The movie follows a young woman hoping for sorority presidency who adopts a sloth as a potential mascot. But when a series of deaths point to the sloth as a suspect, she must untangle a bizarre mystery to clear its name and her own reputation. I can't believe we ended with Slaughterhouse. Not the finest moment, but you know what? A lot of people really liked that film and thought it was fun. Let me know how many you've seen from this list down below. And just around the corner, I will be having my top 10s of the year. So that's my top 10 horror movies and my top 10 other movies, which are basically really disturbing dramas. You know me. Till then, why not check out my biggest disappointments of 2023? A little bit of a rant video. Enjoy. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye, friends.